All right, welcome everybody to round 2 of Grand Prix Minneapolis. We have Jacob Golding against Adam Driscoll here. Some Australia versus United States action here ahead of the Pro Tour next week.
Yeah, and obviously here early on in the tournament, a lot of the 3x players that we'll see in the Pro Tour next week haven't entered the field yet, but both players leading off on planes. I think that white was the story of last weekend, and white obviously a color that I've had a lot of success with. White I think is a color that is rising more in competitive players' evaluations of this format, and I expect that we'll see planes be pretty successful throughout the weekend.
Yeah, as you see here. So I'm Corbin Hosser. I'm with Paul Reitzel, Rich Hagon. Here we go. Green-white on one side, blue-white on the other. Resco Swiftclaw staring down a Johnny's Pride Mate here from Driscoll, who is going to follow up with a 3-drop, and it's a Manolith. Okay, not exactly aggressive with Manolith.
Yeah, Manolith is a sealed deck card, right? That's sealed deck in Sand Black is the times you want to see Manolith. You oftentimes, in sealed decks, you're not going to be able to play a consistent 2-color, synergistic archetype, so Manolith can help smooth your mana base and potentially accelerate you.
Yeah, and it looks like the Resco Swiftclaw is going to get on in there. Driscoll, I can't tell if he's thinking about it or taking the damage, but the turn has been passed back with just a tap land coming out from Jacob Golding here. So looks like he did take the damage. Down to 17, first blood drawn by Jacob Golding. But now with that Manolith untapped, lots of mana available for Driscoll. We'll see what he follows up with.
Yeah, and a Risco Swiftclaw is one of the cards that we mentioned is generally speaking weaker in sealed deck than in some of the aggressive, white-red strategies you see in draft. But here, about as good a situation for Risco Swiftclaw as you can imagine. It's already got in for 3 damage, and it actually matches up pretty well in terms of being able to trade for both of Adam's first 2 creatures. So a nice Risco Swiftclaw here in sealed. Yeah,
it's one of those cards that seems to, with 1 toughness can sometimes be, a downside, but 3 power. And it looks like he's going to stay aggressive here, bouncing the Bristling Boar with Disperse, likely clearing the way for another attack from the Resco Swiftclaw.
Yeah, and that's a play that I've seen some players make here. It's a tempo-based play. Obviously, you're sacrificing card advantage in favor of kind of the immediacy, being able to get more damage in, and it would indicate to me that Jacob has a feeling that he has flyers or some other way to sort of press his advantage from a damage perspective.
Right, and you notice he does have all 3 colors of mana over there, green, white, and blue, already ahead in the damage race, and now with that tempo play, has the opportunity to follow up. And look at that, Valiant Knight coming down. That is quite the rare here from this set.
Yeah, and big problem for Adam already. I mean, that's the thing you don't want to let you get going here. So obviously not a lot to combo with it yet, but the kind of card that is obviously you develop your mana base threatens really terrifying attacks, and you have to always be aware of the activated ability.
Yeah, and absolutely. It's doesn't need other knights to be good, although Rapid Bite will take it down. So that was a nice play from Driscoll to get back in the game there. Uses his mana very efficiently. Also gets to replay the Bristling Boar. Kind of getting some of that tempo back there.
Yeah, and Adam's got to love that situation, right? You are up a card already because your opponent's used the Disperse just to bounce your creature, but you have enough lands in play that you're able to do 2 things in 1 turn, and Adam kind of with a nice sequence there to be able to take the lead.
Yeah, kind of pays off the Manolith again, but Jacob Golding staying aggressive, turning that Resco Swiftclaw sideways yet again, and here comes the Stag. That is going to be very, very powerful as this game goes on. Able to tap down a creature on the attack, and now this aggressive line from Golding starts to make a little bit of sense here, following up with the Star Crown Stag.
Yeah, last week, Corbin, in Sacramento, we saw so many Star Crown Stags be the card of the round, I think 3 times. We had just this little common just consistently dominating proceedings.
Yeah, and they've put this triggered ability on many creatures throughout Magic history, and it's always been something that players have initially underrated every single time. And then they play it more and more, and you just get into these turns where you have defense planned, and it just goes absolutely terribly because of the Star Crown Stag.
Right, and you can see there, I mean, all right, Suspicious Bookcase joining the board for Driscoll, and he turns the Bristling Boar sideways because, I mean, it's not going to be able to block that Star Crown Stag, and he's going to need something else, but he just passes the turn back. So Star Crown Stag is going to be able to force through some damage here with the Swiftclaw if Jacob Golding wants to go that way.
Right, and these are situations that you often find against Star Crown Stag where you expect them to use the trigger and then you set up at least 1 good block. But that runs into, if Jacob has anything, now all of a sudden you have no good blocks, you could take a lot of damage.
Right, and that is something right there. The Cavalry comes down, and that is going to give +2/+0 first strike to Rescue Swiftclaw. Tap down Suspicious Bookcase. That is an attack for 8, I believe, right there. That is a huge swing with Adam at just 11 life right now and 1 blocker.
Right, and Adam had hoped, I guess, to be able to trade off as a Johnny Pride mate for Resco Swiftclaw. Jacob, obviously with a handful of cards in all 3 colors of mana, had access to something. And once again, we see the Stag combine with something like a trigger or a trick to create a really uncomfortable combat for Adam, and he really needs to have something in hand here.
Yeah, he does have, as you can see, 5 mana open, including any color with that mana list. So he needs, I would assume, some sort of combat trick or removal spell or something here. But it looks like he's thinking about it. This is a big attack. This is a crucial turn of this game.
Yeah, he's just going to take
All right,
take
it. Take 8, down to 3. Well, he has plenty of mana, so if he's able to find something to stabilize the board, but that's a Take Vengeance taking down the board, so 1 more creature down now for Driscoll, who needs something really big to get back into the game here. It looks like he might have picked up something there. It looks like he...
It's a Hieromancer's Cage.
Yeah, that's a removal spell that deals with the Starcrown Stag at least, so that's a start. He's going to go ahead and play it. Take down the Stag. Okay, well, now we've got sort of a board at parity a little bit here with, Driscoll's at 3 life, but he's stemmed the bleeding for the moment.
Yeah, if you're Adam, you can't feel too good, though, as Jacob has missed multiple land drops, so a handful of probable spells, and with Adam at 3 life here, it's certainly plausible that at least one of them can force through that last couple points of damage.
Yeah, and here comes the 5th land for Jacob Golding. Possibly unlocks his hand. Not sure exactly what he's working with, but we'll see. He's just going to go ahead and start things off by turning them sideways.
Inspired Charge is the first thing that sort of pops into your brain here, but certainly with that much mana up, there's a lot of different things that Jacob could have.
Yeah, and instead he just takes the trade. So, okay, it's just a 2-1 against an 0-4 right now. We'll see if Golding's able to further get things onto the board. But as you said, missing land drops there. All right, there you go. So that is not the most aggressive of creatures to follow up with.
Yeah, Adam's saying, okay, you played a land, you played a 1-3, if the rest of your hand is that power level or less, then I've got a shot.
Yeah, Diamond Mare, but Aven Windmage is pretty good. That is exactly what Jacob Golding needs. And now all of a sudden, that's a 2-power flyer with Driscoll at 3 life. He's just 1 non-creature spell away from triggering the ability on that and getting in for 3 damage.
Yeah, and I think a pretty nice attack there by Jacob on his last turn by offering the trade for a Swiftclaw and the Johnny's Pride Mate. The Swiftclaw was never going to be better than it was right there, whereas the Pride Mate can only get stronger as the game goes along. So I think a nice play from Jacob.
Yeah, so as you see, Diamond Mare, it's a 1-3. It's not aggressive, but it does sometimes turn on the artifact synergies in these decks that you'll see in Core Set 2019. But it's that Aven Windmage that's a big problem right now. And Elvish Rejuvenator is certainly a good card, but not exactly what Driscoll needs at this moment.
Yep. Yeah, actually been pretty impressed by Diamond Mare last weekend in Sacramento, both of the artifact synergies and the life gain synergies from things like the white-black deck. So as a 2-mana 1-3, never that exciting, but also if it gains you 4, 5, even 6 life over the course of the game, you're actually talking about a card that on rate alone is not that bad. Yeah,
and as a 1-3, it actually blocks, we've already seen multiple X1 creatures here in the first couple turns of this game. So Windmage comes in, it looks like no spell from Golding to make it lethal, so Driscoll might get another turn here. Going to fall to 1 life from the attack.
It's going to have to be something like Cleansing Nova at this point to get Adam out of this sort of mess.
Yeah, absolutely, because that is a Thopter joining the field thanks to that Aviation Pioneer. So now 2 lethal attackers for Golding. So yeah, Driscoll back up against the wall here. We'll see if his deck's able to reward him to get back in this one. Otherwise, Golding might be taking the first game here.
Yeah, looks like the opening salvo is heading the way of Australia.
Yeah, that's right. Jacob Golding, 2nd place at GP Sydney not too long ago. So
that's right. Yep, that's what qualified him for the Pro Tour next week. Going to play alongside James O'Rourke, who we'll also see in the feature match area this round.
Yeah, and there you go. Jacob Golding takes it down. Adam Driscoll is not able to find an answer to those flyers. And we are off to sideboard here with Jacob Golding up 1-0. So we saw a bunch of it was the flyers in the end that took it down there, but a little aggressive start from Golding and sequenced it very well. So how do you, if you're Driscoll and you're seeing kind of the way you lost that game, how do you want to match up against these type of decks that have a lot of combat tricks and evasion and some of these tempo type plays that we saw Jacob Golding make?
Well, looking at Adam's deck list, his deck is more powerful late game kind of cards. So 2 copies of Colossal Dreadmaw being featured. So he has those kind of powerful ground pound creatures that if he gets up to 6 mana, he should be able to win the game. Jacob, he's thinking. Adam is thinking that Jacob is probably playing a tempo white-blue flyers. I mean, he's using disperse aggressively just to sneak in damage. So that's the type of game that Jacob wants to play. So Adam should feel like he probably has inevitability. Should try to get the game into the late game, trade off 1-for-1 as much as possible, and then try to deal big points, chunk damage with things like Dreadmaw as opposed to kind of chipping in. Yeah,
and that Colossal Dreadmaw. I mean, we saw the mana lift. Able to slam that thing down a little early, as long with the Eldritch Rejuvenator. I mean. You could have a pretty quick Colossal Dreadmaw out there, and that really puts pressure on Golding to have one of those tempo spells to even keep in the game, because as great as the evasive creatures are, poking in for 1 and 2 damage not quite as good as six at a time.
All right, so as promised at this show, we're going to do some fact or fictions in between games 1 and 2 of our main match. So, Paul, fact or fiction? Remember what we said about life gain, where it was just like incidental was where you wanted to be, and so revitalize. No. Fact or fiction?
I think that's fiction. I quite like Revitalize, and it's a card that's moved up for me in terms of my pick order. So I think obviously if you're drafting sort of a white-black deck where you're going to get to trigger things like in Johnny's Pride Mate, it's obviously just objectively strong. I think in Sealed deck, where you have a huge delta in power level between your best cards and your worst cards, using things that we call cantrips that have the draw card clause in them is a really useful way to get to them more often during games.
Gaming is a serious business. I don't intend to mess around. Comedy is not my specialty. You actually meant all that, didn't you?
I come to bring the hard-hitting analysis, yeah.
So, yes, sometimes yes, especially in life game. Yes.
Oh, yes, yeah. And in Sealed deck, it's a card that's going to make more than half of my white decks.
Okay, so Corbin, just so you know, Revitalize into the Brew Cruise like next constructed.
I mean, life gain, it's the thing. Resplendent Angel, Lyra Dawnbringer, there are a lot of life gain synergies right now.
Okay, let's try one more. Fact or fiction? Let's see what we've got here. Here we go. Take Vengeance. So destroy target tapped creature for 1 and a white as a sorcery. In an aggressive deck, you don't want this. By the time opponents are attacking with their creatures, you've basically already lost. Paul, fact or fiction?
I mean, it's fact with a huge caveat. I mean, I think this is a true concept that's important to realize, that reactive removal spells like this are decreased in value in aggressive decks, but people take this concept too far. You shouldn't take Vengeance over like a really powerful early drop for your deck or an important piece for your synergistic plan, but Take Vengeance is still a totally fine card. People are still going to have mythics that they're attacking you with that you need to find a way to remove, and you should never be embarrassed about putting Take Vengeance in your deck. So, I'll say fact because I think people need to learn the lesson, but play Take Vengeance.
Right, so for the purposes of the lesson, the idea that reactive cards in an aggro strategy is a non-bow, as we say, the opposite of a combo, it works against each other. But you would certainly play this over, let's say a third Oreskos Swiftclaw, which is your 7th 2-drop.
Right. I mean, again, the third Oreskos Swiftclaw is not going to help you, when your opponent is just absolutely smashing you with an Elder Dragon. So, I think it's not a bad idea to include a Take Vengeance in your deck, no matter what your strategy is.
Okay, so we're getting there. We're filling up the 2 slot for you, Corbin. We've got Revitalize, and we've got
these. I don't know about Take Vengeance. So Revitalize, I can get down with some life gain strategies. That would be fun.
Okay, well, Encircle the Earth is the plan for Jacob Golding. He has done most of that by getting here from Australia. It's all Australia here in round number 2. Players are getting ready for game number 2. Both these players have 3 points by having 1 by each. So Adam Driscoll sits at 1-0, Jacob Golding 1-0. Here comes game number 2. It's going to be mulligan time for Jacob Golding.
Yeah, Golding shipping it down to 6. That if you want to play a tempo game, sometimes mulliganing can be pretty rough. On the other hand, if you have a nice aggressive start, you don't need a lot of cards because you're not going to play a long game.
Yeah, and Jacob actually did win game 1, so the score is reversed here. So Jacob very likely to be on the draw here, I would imagine, in game 2. If the new mulligan rules, basically, if you're on the draw, mulliganing is just not that painful. You have 6 cards, plus the scry, plus the draw. I've seen a lot of the great players really aggressively mulliganing in limited when they're on the draw.
Yeah, I mean, the scry rule implemented a couple years ago, of course, means that when you mulligan, you can scry when you mulligan. So you get to see a 7th card, and, if you want it on top, then it's not really any different than it would have been in the old days. But if you want to put it on bottom, as Jacob Golding does here, it's not exactly drawing a card, but it's certainly not bad either.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jacob's deck is a deck that really wants to get off to an aggressive start, so he can't just keep any 7 lands and spells.
Right, and Driscoll, first turn Fountain of Renewal here, so we talked about life gain incidentally, and here you go, Fountain of Renewal. You gain a life every turn, which helps with all those life gain synergies, and then later you can cash in for a card, and there's some life gain synergies right there. So Johnny's Pridemate hits a battlefield. This card's been around for a long time, and you always get to see it do this right here. Gain a life, put a counter on my Johnny's Pridemate. Now it's a 3-3, and with Jacob Golding on the mulligan and on the draw, this Pridemate could get out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing that when you're showing your sealed deck to your friends before the tournament starts, you show them, I have these two, I could draw them together, and they say, who would be that lucky, basically, to have that happen to them?
Well, now we're talking over here. This is Johnny's Pridemate is going to be good. The Vanguard arrives. So what that is, it's a 1 mana 1/1, the Onin Vanguard here, but if you have 3 or more creatures at the beginning of combat, it gets +1/+1 until the turn. That's fine. It makes it a 1 mana 2/2. But you also gain a life, and without a Johnny's Pridemate in play, this thing could start taking up 2 counters a turn, and that will quickly overwhelm that Swiftclaw.
Yeah, in draft yesterday, I had Vanguard on 1, Daybreak Chaplain on 2, Pridemate on 3, attack, it's a 4/4 on turn 3.
That's pretty good. So wall of Miss here for Golding.
Yay!
it's an 0/5. Hey, he'll take care of it for 1 turn, maybe. Maybe. If Driscoll has a creature here, that Pridemate's going to get even larger and just swing right on through that wall.
Do you like Wall of Mist, Paul?
Yeah, walls in general are not cards that I particularly like. I'm a big fan of attacking. There are very specific situations where you can include walls like this in your deck. It's usually when you have really powerful late game threats, bombs, or your main plan is attacking with evasive creatures, for example, creatures with flying.
Right.
Jacob's deck, I think, probably has too much of the Oresco Swiftclaw, Starcrown, Stag, Cavalry Drillmaster, too much of that action for me to want to include Wall of Mist in it. But we haven't seen enough of his deck to know for sure.
Yeah, and this is a rough spot to be in if you're Jacob. That Wall of Mist, not even able to get in front of the 2-drop from Adam Driscoll. Johnny's Pridemate all the way up to a 5/5, and Golding's going to have to find an answer to that, or it's going to very quickly just start killing a creature every turn.
And this is why you include Take Vengeance in your aggressive decks.
That's exactly right.
Like this.
Take Vengeance would work. Disperse would slow it down. That's not bad either, though. Valiant Knight coming back down, but Golding can't attack. He's still got to find an answer to this now. 6/6 of Johnny's Pridemate is going to get even larger in combat. And by the way, that's a bristling board that can only be blocked by 1 creature that joined the battlefield for Driscoll. So he's got complete control of this game right now.
Yeah, and another clean attack here with the Pridemate, which is going to grow to 7/7. So, really good spot for Adam Driscoll against a player who is mulliganed and obviously drawing a couple underpowered 2-drops. So Adam has to love the situation he's in and wants to try to figure out how to close the game out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's right, because with this Pridemate growing ever larger, the only thing you can lose to, and obviously if Golding had an answer, he would have played it already. So if you can end the game before he can dig to that answer. Now, if you're Golding, how do you try to dig back out of this? I mean, you have your Bomb Rare in play. Valiant Knight's very good, but...
That's what you want.
Yeah.
There you go. That'll do it.
Yeah, basically, if Adam were at something like 13 right now, you could plan some kind of, some sort of damage race and try to block the Johnny's Pridemate and then swing back for damage. But realistically, Jacob just needs to survive to be able to find a clean answer to the Johnny's Pridemate, whether that's Luminous Bonds, Take Vengeance, or at least a bounce spell to buy him some more time.
Yeah, Disperse would do wonders. I mean, the Adam Driscoll's board is huge with that Pridemate, but Golding kind of has the rest of it under control if you look at it that way, and he just passes the turn back here with 5 mana, and it could represent a lot of things. So this combat will be a little more tricky for Driscoll.
Yeah, again, totally lost. Good point, Rich. Yes, another one of the cards. I mean, blue-white's certainly plenty of answers to just an 8/8 ground pounder, but Jacob kind of needs them sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and the hard part here is how sort of free this 8/8 was for Driscoll, right? I mean, this is his 2-drop. This was his Grizzly Bear that has just grown to completely take over this game.
Right. Yep. And it looks like he still has more action in reserve. So.
Yeah, thinking through everything Golding could have here. He could have Disperse. He could have totally lost. So what do you do if you're Adam Driscoll?
Yeah, you still have clean attack, right? Yeah. With the Pridemate. I mean, any sort of trick that Jacob has is gonna. there's nothing that not attacking is going to do for you. So, oh, wow.
Mighty Leap for the win. That's what we need.
Right, here we go. 6 mana. There it is. That Colossal Dreadmaw we talked about. The 6/6 Trampler. He doesn't swing, though. Driscoll content to keep the 9/9 back. But you know what? Jacob Golding has seen enough. Dreadmaw along with that Johnny's Pride Mate. So we talked about the life gain. That is a yes, 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 yes kind of moment right there.
Yeah, and a little bit of a surprising and early concession there from Jacob.
Right.
For example, and this is maybe a little bit inside baseball, but Adam can have very high confidence that Jacob does not have Cleansing Nova in his deck, since you would never concede a game like that if you could draw a Cleansing Nova.
But wouldn't you even go beyond that? Because obviously, yes, that's a big rare and so on, which he's unlikely to have. But we just went through 3 common answers to a 9/9. Set at least temporarily 2 bounce spells and a pacifism. Don't you just assume he's got none of those?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, obviously it was going to be a pretty ugly combat for him on the next turn. It was going to have to be double block your Dreadmaw, both my creatures. They both go to the graveyard. Block the, chump block the Ajani's Pride Mate, still take 4 damage. I mean, Jacob was in really, really bad shape there. So, he certainly couldn't have been much more than 1% to win the game as it was. But unless you had something like Cleansing Nova, which obviously he does not.
Yeah, so here we go. 1-1 right now between Jacob Golding and Adam Driscoll. Game 3 for everything. Those were 2 very different games. We saw Jacob Golding in Game 1 completely execute his tempo-paced plan, get in early damage, get the evasive creatures to finish it off. But in Game 2, Adam Driscoll just went far, far over the top.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get a much better draw than Adam had in Game 2. And again, as good as his draw was, it would have been pretty much, stonewalled by essentially, 1 common from Jacob. Jacob just unfortunately drew the bottom half of his deck.
So just to let you know that we're in round number 2 of our international MTG launch coverage here from GP Minneapolis. Last round we saw 3 players from Chile in the feature match area. This round it's Australia featured. Next round, Paulo Vida Dama da Rosa, the coincidentally Brazilian Hall of Famer, will be giving you his rundown on 4 of the Brazilian players in the field. But here, after the Jacob Golding match, we'll take you across to Ivan Schrader. Now, he's playing at the Pro Tour next week, an RPTQ winner, but last year was the winner of Team GP Sydney 2017. And then James O'Rourke completes our Australian trilogy. He's actually the teammate next week of Jacob Golding. They were runners-up at Sydney, the GP, this year. So Golding, Schrader, and then O'Rourke, your menu for round number 2 here at Grand Prix Minneapolis.
I heard from Paulo that he's going to be commentating the next match in Portuguese. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So we actually did when we were commentating together at Porto Alegre at the GP. We did a simulcast where he commentated live in Portuguese and I commentated live in English, which was kind of fun for just a couple of minutes. I think it fried several people's minds, but that's collateral damage.
Well, in fraternity with Paulo, I will speak Australian for the remainder of this match, and that way we can.
Will you?
You got the accent ready?
Really?
No, oh
now you see, if we get to turbo at the end of the round, I will do that in an Australian accent. But God willing, that won't have to happen.
Chad got their fingers crossed now.
4 times the speed in Australian is a challenge. But
I thought I said gaming is a serious business here. We can't be messing around.
I'm in between the two of you here. I've got serious business on my right. I've got Rich on my left.
Yes, and everyone in chat's thinking, don't worry, Paul, comedy isn't Rich's specialty either. See, they laughed at that one. Thanks.
Now, we were talking about you mentioned the Pro Tour next week. That's one of my favorite parts of these GPs right before the Pro Tour. When they're in the same city, you get not just all the pros and all the best players in the room, but players from across the entire world who we typically don't see here in the United States on this side of the Atlantic or Pacific in this case.
Yeah, making notes before the weekend. Argentina, Pozzo and Salvato. David Mines from Australia. Lots of Brazilians here. You've got Yu Chen Liu from China, Peter Sahurek from the Czech Republic, Mark Tobias from Germany, ton of French players here, Dezani, Depraz, Levy, Greece's Makis Matsoukas from Hong Kong, Li Shichan, Yang Wing Chun, a ton of Japanese players. My word, it's like the Hall of Fame ceremony from Japan. You've got Thomas Hendricks of the Netherlands, the Poles, Piotr Glagowski, Gregor Kowalski, from Portugal, Marcia Carvalho, Gonçalves Pinto, Budakov from Russia, the Magic Online champion, Kelvin Chu from Singapore, Huang Hao Shan, Taiwan. And that's before you get to all the great players from the United States who are here. So it is a terrific lineup.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing, it kind of goes both ways, right? If you're a player who's local and this is the GP you get to, on the one hand, it just got a lot harder to win. But hey, on the other hand, these are the players you watch every week on camera at the Pro Tour and the content they make, and you get a chance to meet them and maybe even play against them. And that's, it kind of makes the GP experience for a lot of people.
And maybe a good chance to catch a pro napping, too, right? With the Pro Tour next week being unified, constructed, perhaps some of the pros will not have spent as much time on course at 2019 Limited. So if you're an up-and-coming, aspiring amateur player and you really know your stuff, there's no reason you can't have an edge over some of those big names that you said before.
And no better feeling than going home and telling all of your friends that you beat a Hall of Famer in round 3. Or 4, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right, so back to our match here. Round 2, GP Minneapolis, Jacob Golding, Adam Driscoll, tied 1-1, heading to a game 3. Looks like Golding kept 7, Driscoll going down to 6, and Golding, of course, is on the play, so we'll see if he's able to duplicate. Oh, he's going down to 5.
Yeah,
okay,
wow. Looks like Jacob, I think, actually has 6 cards and Adam down to 5. So normally 5, close to a death sentence in sealed
right.
deck. But against 6 cards, it's pretty balanced here. So hopefully he keeps the 6.
Yeah, we miss a round of mulligans there. But hey, if both players mulligan, it's like both players keeping. So here we go. Both shipping the card to the bottom with the scry. We have kept and Plains leading it off for Golding here in game 3. Explosive apparatus, I believe, there for Adam Driscoll. That's a removal spell of sorts, a little slow. Do you like that in this format?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit last weekend. It's a card in sealed deck that you're always going to play. Sometimes you just need to kill Mystic Archaeologist or
right.
something of that nature. In draft, it's a little bit weaker just because on rate, on just the cost of the ability, you're not getting a lot of effect for that much mana. But you're always going to want it in something like a white-blue deck because of the artifact synergies. So with Scholar of Stars and things of that ilk. So in sealed deck, though, a perfectly acceptable weaker removal spell.
Right.
You want to play all your removal spells in limited or in sealed.
Yeah, and it's a little more flexible, of course, because it's 1 mana up front, and then you can use the 3 whenever it's most convenient. But Aviation Pioneer, a pretty good 3-drop with that in play here from Golding because it puts 2 bodies on the field, and looks like Driscoll is just going to take the 2 damage here down to 18. Not going to use that apparatus quite yet, and here comes a Star Crown Stag right on time for Jacob Golding. And Driscoll looks like he's on mono forests over there, so this Star Crown Stag could do some work even if he is able to find something to play.
Yeah, tough spot for Adam. Obviously, not going to be able to add anything to the board this turn that interacts with Jacob's side. Yeah,
Marauder's Axe, not exactly what you want. That whatever creature that does end up on it's just going to get tapped down by that stag.
And, Owen Turtenwald has said on his stream multiple times how much he dislikes playing equipment in general in his limited deck. So they need to be, even the rare equipment that a lot of the people like, he tends to not really like because he feels like you're getting basically fundamentally 2 for 1.
Yeah, and it certainly looks pretty bad here. Jacob Golding is just crushing it now with this Angel of the Dawn joining the battlefield. +1/+1 in vigilance to the entire team, which just means that was a huge hit. And we talked about putting 2 creatures on the field with 1 with that Aviation Pioneer, and it gets paid off right there with the Angel. And Driscoll just has to pass back down to 10 life already.
Another one.
Oh, wow. Wow, that is rough. Well, the Explosive Apparatus is going to try to help, but that is still a huge hit right there. I think that's lethal.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And counting to 10, Driscoll doing the math, and the hand comes out. There you go, Jacob Golding taking it down 2-1. That was a clinic in what you want your tempo deck to look like right there.
Advanced Australia Fair. They win their first match in the feature match area. So we'll head on back to the desk while we set ourselves up for more time walk action. Yeah, we got three games there, but that third game was
ugly.
Not a lot of Okay, so that's the story of our first part of round number 2. Corbin and Paul and I will be back in just a little bit with some more action. And when we come back, just checking our feature match area lineup, Ivan Schrader will be next against Lachlan Canavan, and then James O'Rourke against Brant Ward. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more action from round 2 coming right up. Hello everyone, welcome back to Grand Prix Minneapolis. It's MTG Launch, the International Edition. It's Australia who have already won their first feature match. Rich, Corbin and Paul here with you. We have got things all lined up to head back to the feature match area for our first time walk match of the round. And this features Ivan Schrader of Team Australia against Lachlan Canavan of the United States. So let's head down to the feature match area, and here with the call is Corbin and Paul.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody, here. Round 2, GP Minneapolis. Ivan versus Lachlan here. So we saw Australia take the first of the international battle here, and we'll see if Lachlan can turn things around here. Leads on Foul, Orchard, and Force, and a pass. Looks like Ivan is on white-red over there. So typically these white-red decks tend to be pretty aggressive in this sealed format, right?
Yeah, and certainly a nice version of it here from Ivan. 2 copies of Star Crown Stag, 2 Luminous Bonds, 2 of the Dark Dweller Oracle. So Ivan with a really nice white-red aggressive deck. And we talked about last week in sealed deck, you either need lots of bombs, you need the removal spells to deal with bombs, or you need to turn over the apple cart with things like an aggressive deck. And Ivan looks like he wants to just get the game over with quickly.
Yeah, we see this at Johnny's Pride Mate again. Not sure if this was going to be quite as good as the one we saw last round, but regardless, the Daggerback Basilisk there from Lachlan should be able to answer at least one threat from Ivan whenever it does enter combat here. Yeah. What do you think about the Basilisk? I mean, Death Touch creatures are sort of a removal spell, right?
Yeah, I've always liked the Daggerback Basilisk. The fact that Shock is there at common means that sometimes it can cause you to get sort of tempoed out.
Right.
But Daggerback Basilisk, being able to trade up, basically trade for something that costs more than 3 mana a lot of the time, it's a card that you're almost always going to include in your green decks.
Right, and here we see Ivan, he does add the Drill Master to the board, gets in for 4 with that Pride Mate. So the Basilisk held at bay that turn, and we'll see if just a lot of 2-power creatures coming out from Ivan here. And, there you go, Vine Mare for Lachlan. That is a 5/3 hexproof creature. That is very good if it follows up with enchantments.
Yeah, Vine Mare.
Or anything, any combat trick.
Vine Mare, one of the cards from Core Set 2019 we've seen even make a constructed splash. Obviously, really tough to deal with in Limited. And, you put something like an Oaken Form on it or something. We saw a lot of people putting Knightly Valor on it last weekend. And that can be really, really tough and end the game pretty quickly.
Right, and the other thing is, of course, it can't be blocked by black creatures. Not incredibly relevant here, but that might be a relevant one right there from Schrader as he adds the Goblin that can get some extra value as the game goes along here, although he did miss a 4th land drop.
Yeah, and Ivan's gotten Lachlan down to 16, but that's still pretty far out of range of the things like Lava Axe or that he may want to close the game out with. So, wow. Yeah,
you talked about suiting up the Vine Mare. There we go. I believe that's an Oaken Form underneath there. That makes for a very large Vine Mare. An 8/6 coming into the red zone.
Yeah, and Ivan with a tough decision point already. Does he want to just throw all of his creatures in front of the Vine Mare and cross his fingers? And he says it's too risky.
Yeah, I mean, Lachlan's representing a Titanic Growth or some other trick over there, so it would have been a very risky block. Instead, he just takes a huge hit, though, but now hopefully gets into some sort of racing situation. Still just on 3 lands for the moment, so that does restrict his options. We'll see if he's able to follow up with a play here to try to get back in against that Vine Mare.
This is really a crucial turn for Ivan, right? I mean, he can't take too many more hits from that Vine Mare, obviously, so he needs to find a way to both get damage in, continue to develop his board, and get Daggerback Basilisk off the board, essentially all in the same turn. Can he do that with 3 mana? I don't know.
Yeah, at the very least, he needs to get something down to try to gang block the Vine Mare to get it off the table one way or another, and we'll see if he opts for that. He's thinking about turning them sideways, and there we go, getting aggressive with the team. So, of course, I believe he can, whatever gets blocked here, and they, of course, does block the Dark Dweller Oracle, try to prevent value. We'll see if Ivan has a trick for this, or he's just going to pass. All right, just content to trade them off, get in for 4 damage, put Lachlan down to 12, but still facing down that Vine Mare without an obvious answer. 4th land does come down, though.
Do we know if Ivan has Heroic Reinforcements?
He does not have access to Heroic Reinforcements.
Because that's the kind of card that just steals the game from nowhere.
Well, he does have a Star Crown Stag, so he's actually got a nice aggressive posture set up here, and I think I saw Luminous Bonds in his hand as well, so trying to get into the race here.
And Ivan with now the type of board with the Stag, I was going to say that could want to hold back a Vine Mare since Ivan's threatening things like Trumpet Blast, but no fear here.
Yeah, sends it crashing on in. Ivan just takes it down to 4. So, he looked really far down, and he, still could be. But the way he played it last turn, being aggressive, getting in some damage, even though, you lose sort of your high-value card in your rare, gives you the opportunity to seal the game here. But 2 creatures from Lachlan to follow up means that there are some walls in the way of that. Plus some life gain. I believe up to 13 there.
Yeah, but again, Lachlan, kind of a risky attack, an aggressive and bold attack, but something like a shock and a trumpet blast, and all of a sudden Ivan steals a game out of nowhere.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Ivan definitely not out of this game, and he's going to need to start putting things in front of the Vine Mare, which is unfortunately going to limit his ability to keep the pressure up.
Yeah, it looks like Lachlan probably chose green, I guess.
Chose green. Okay, I did not go up to 13 there. Yeah, so
that's got to be pretty scary if you're Ivan. That Lachlan has chosen green. He's giving up the opportunity to gain a life right now, indicating he's got so many other good green cards in his hand for next turn that he's going to gain more life from it. So Ivan can't be thrilled about that.
Yeah, plus he's still got this Vine Mare you have to worry about.
Right.
So Lachlan in complete control of this game. And, of course, that Death Baron can pump up any of his other black creatures as well. I believe it is skeletons and zombies you control, get +1/+1, and Death Touch. So a lot of scary things in the long game here represented, and Ivan looking for something to get back into the game. And
yeah, it's that word "other" that's important. Because
right.
It's all the skeletons, but
right.
It's the other zombies because Death Baron is a zombie wizard. It's also got a Luminous Bonds on it.
It does, and it's, the ability is still good. It is one attacker down. Here comes the attack from Ivan. Taps down the blocker, and looks like we're getting in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage, putting Lachlan down to 5. But does he have anything to deal with his Vine Mare? Second land, second mana available, and there is a blocker if nothing else.
And I love this play from Ivan. I mean, he dies to almost anything that Lachlan can have, but he's given himself at least a chance if Lachlan has nothing. And you just kind of, when your opponent puts out an 8/6 hexproof, you get to kind of assume they have nothing else. You know what I mean? Because you're going to lose all the games in which they do have more spells.
Yeah, and you have to assume if Lachlan did have an answer to the blocker, he would play it immediately and crash on in. But instead, just turns it sideways, and the chump block is able to get made. And now all of a sudden, Ivan, you talked about it, is in a position, despite being what looked could be kind of hopeless against this 8/6 Vine Mare he can never answer, might have a way to get through. A Vigilant Baloth arrives for Lachlan, but we'll see if Ivan can find a way to piece together 6 damage this turn. The Starcrown Stag's certainly going to help.
Yeah, and Ivan has Lachlan dead with almost anything.
Yeah, and he taps out pre-combat here. 4 mana coming in. That is another Goblin where I believe that's a Trash Master, and it can sacrifice itself to take down an artifact.
Wow.
And now with the Starcrown Stag, it looks like Ivan might be able to get this. He did it! Wow, what a great game by Ivan there to deal with that Vine Mare. Look like Lachlan just had it locked up. He put an 8/6 hexproof into play. How are you going to deal with that? Well, Ivan did it, and now he is up a game as we head to game 2 here of our Time Walk match at GP Minnesota.
Yeah, you just do it the way Boros does it. You put out a Starcrown Stag, you just take 16 to the face, then
why not?
you throw out 1 blocker for it. That's the same. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, that game just looked like it was in the bag for Lachlan early on. Great comeback there by Ivan. Just shows how there are many different ways to win a game. One of which is getting a lot of life off of Child of Night, which is Lachlan has here.
And notice,
get a no conform on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
and notice here that Ivan has actually moved into a different deck for game 2. We saw a lot of players do this last week in Sacramento, where Ivan's removed the red from his deck for blue. Why is he doing that? It's because he saw things like Oakenform in game 1 from Lachlan, so he wants to dip into blue, presumably for some of those bounce spells we talked about earlier, Exclusion Mage, Disperse, Totally Lost, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that kind of scares a lot of players, is the idea of completely changing things up. And I mean, how often in sealed deck is it correct to be able to switch around like this?
I think it's an underused skill. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where you've already got your cards all in those sleeves, and it's just a whole big thing, and you have to redo your mana base and kind of figure out exactly what the configuration is, and you need to do all of that under the kind of constraints of tournament dynamics and sort of the clock. So, but it's a really important skill, understanding the way certain colors that you've opened in sealed deck match up against what your opponent's showing you in game 1.
Yeah, catching up here, Lachlan getting the beatdown on Strangling Spores, taking out the Avon Wimere. The Reassembling Skeleton, generally a defensive card, but it can turn itself sideways too, and along with the Child Knight, puts Ivan down to 15, and he does have the stag, but you've talked about it. That card's best when you're on the front foot, and in this case, Ivan not so much on the front foot, plus the lifelink from Child of Night kind of makes being aggressive a little harder.
Yeah, and Ivan here actually sideboarded into blue. He doesn't have any of those cards that I just mentioned. He actually sideboarded into blue for things like 2 Avon Windmage and 2 Snapping Drake. So he really highly values the ability to be evasive. Thinks, okay, Lachlan's got all of this green fat, nice black defensive creatures, good kind of high toughness defense. I'm just going to fly over it, basically. And so, Ivan, stabilized basically at 15 life, and now he looks like he's going to go on the offense.
Yeah, and it helps that Lachlan was not able to add too much to the board there. Colossal Majesty, really good in the long game. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you get to draw a card, but no creature with power 4 or greater yet. And you think if he had it, he would have played it before the Majesty if he was able. So it takes a little bit of the pressure he was applying off, and now with Starcrown Stag and a Pegasus Courser, Ivan is setting up to be able to crack back for a little bit of damage here.
Yeah, and Ivan got to be happy about the way that went for him. But Lachlan gaining the life early from the Child of Night, and now he's got that engine out with the Colossal Majesty. Yep. So, late in the game, a green-black deck, in theory, should be stronger than a white-blue deck, right? You're playing the more expensive, larger creatures, the black kind of grindy aspect of that. So Ivan's going to need to see, he needs to kind of shift the paradigm in this game in order to prevent Lachlan from just pulling away with that Majesty.
Yeah, that's right. With the Majesty in play, now following up with that Baloth, that's every single turn that is in play. Lachlan will get to draw an extra card, and Starcrown Stag and Pegasus Course are pretty good, but that is just going to be a lot of cards you're going to have to fight through. He does choose to go for it, though. He's able to give the Stag flying with Pegasus Courser, tap down the Vigilant Baloth. So that is 4 unblockable damage in this case, flying damage coming through from Ivan, and able to tap out after that. Here comes 6 mana. What do we got? Wow, we've got the Sea Serpent. So the Frilled Sea Serpent there, that is a big body that can trade if he wants it to.
Yeah, Canavan won't be thrilled about that.
And I've been impressed with the Frilled Sea Serpent, especially in Limited. It's for blue, a 6-mana 4/6 is actually a pretty reasonable body that blue doesn't always get that size.
Right.
And then the activated ability, while it's extremely expensive, I mean, sometimes 4 points of unblockable damage is all you need to finish off a game. So it's certainly the kind of card that you're absolutely fine being that curve topper in a deck like this. Right.
In this case, it actually matches up really well on this board with 6 points of toughness. It can block the Baloth. Bog Stomper coming down from Lachlan. He's got 6 power, 6 drop of his own, 6/5 there. So kind of a bit of a grindy game here. Now it's attacks get a little more complicated, but that Pegasus Courser really standing out for its ability to give Ivan more options along with that mare.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Ivan's deck, just looking at the blue cards, they're pretty low power level. I mean, it's mostly just commons, that he's talking about. However, flying creatures appear to be pretty strong against Lachlan's deck. So Ivan has correctly identified maybe that's an angle where he can win these sorts of games.
Right.
But like I said, the longer this goes, the better it gets for Lachlan, right? That Colossal Majesty is going to draw him into more interaction like that Strangling Spores. And, interaction is just so powerful when you're drawing multiple cards in a turn.
Right. And, let's not forget about that Child of Night on turn 2 that gained Lachlan a little bit of life. It can gain him life future points. And it's really relevant, even though it might not seem like it on turn 2, because with all these, evasive with the flying and the tapping creatures down, Ivan has a lot of options to make combat tricky, but it's a lot harder to do when Lachlan's at a high life total. And going to dig for more action here with the Sift. So how do you like Sift in this format? I assume it's pretty good in Sealed?
Yeah, Sift is great in Sealed deck, right? I mean, we're talking about Revitalize being playable.
Right.
This is, this is the sort of thing where, most players are going to have, 2 to 5 real all-star type of cards in their deck, and Sift just digs you so deep to try to find them.
Yeah, you draw 3 and then discard 1. So you discard the Sift as well, right, when you cast it. So you're up 3 and down 2. So up a card, but you get that selection on top of it. And you said it, digging 3 deep goes a long way, and we'll see what Ivan was able to dig towards here as he tries to overcome this, this engine that Lachlan has set up on the other side.
Yeah, and Ivan here with an interesting decision point. Looks like he has an access to a copy of Cancel in his hand, but he, I think, is correctly identifying that he can't just afford to sit back on Cancel and take a big hit the next turn, so he's tapping out and just getting aggressive.
Yeah, he's going to dwindle down the Bog Stomper. That's Lachlan's biggest creature, so it's -6, -0. When it blocks, it is destroyed. However, it's not going to get a chance to block his Pegasus Courser and the Stag come in through the air. He does keep the Sea Serpent back, though, to block the Vigilant Baloth. So that play kind of stabilized the board a little bit for him and allowed him to get in a little more damage.
And this is the big turn here for Lachlan, right? Yeah. This is the shields down turn for Ivan where he does not have the mana up for Cancel. Ivan has kind of turned the corner here in terms of the race and has access to, obviously, all of his creatures have sort of evasive type of triggers or activated abilities on them. So Lachlan really needs to have a big turn here and land a Haymaker.
Yeah, and there you go. Poison Tip Archer, that's a pretty good one. Reach, Death Touch whenever another creature dies, an opponent loses a life. So that life loss, for one, it adds up, but also Reach and Death Touch going to go a very long way against that Pegasus Courser, although Starcrown Stag, of course, is an answer on board. Yeah,
but Poison Tip Archer, exactly the kind of Haymaker that's going to kind of throw a wrench into Ivan's plans.
Right.
A little surprising there that Lachlan doesn't make an attack, right? So attacking with Child of Night and the Vigilant Baloth into the Serpent is the kind of play that doesn't leave Ivan with a spectacular block. He can eat the Child of Night, but then you gain 2 life and deal 5 damage to your opponent. It certainly would have been attractive for me to consider an attack like that. And of course, you could bring the Skeleton in as well.
Yeah, and even if he made that block, I mean, he'd be taking 6 because the Child of Night would die and the Poison Tip Archer would deal another point of damage.
Right.
So that would have helped quite a bit there. Of course, he decides to sit back a little more. Now, Ivan swung back to him. He has access to 7 mana. He could make the Sea Serpent unblockable if he wanted, but something tells me those cards in his hand, as he's counting up his mana here, are going to be put to use.
And going back to that for one moment, one thing that new players, I think almost all new and aspiring competitive players could do is at the beginning of every combat step, think about what happens if I attack with everything. Because I think that if you thought about what the results would be, they end up being a lot better than you think they would be if you kind of just take it one step forward. So a lot of times players don't see obvious attacks, but they should at least consider that as an option on every turn.
Well, it feels bad to lose a creature for nothing, right? Although with plenty of cards from that Colossal Majesty. But Lachlan now in a little bit of trouble. A Snapping Drake has entered play as well. The Stag tapped down the Poison Tip Archers we talked about. He's down to 9 life. Can always turn the Child of Night sideways to get 2 back. So you talked about the swap into blue, and you see it playing out perfectly because Lachlan has the ground more than covered. Now Doomed Dissenter alongside the Reassembling Skeleton. He can block forever, and the Vigilant Baloth's a big attacker. But Snapping Drake entering play as well. Plus, I think we might just be looking at what could represent 9 points of damage with the Sea Serpent going unblockable next turn. So Lachlan needs to find something this turn. What are his best options here to try to get back in this game?
Well, he doesn't have good looking blocks. You know what I mean? So you need to start getting aggressive here. You need to try to put your creatures into combat, gain some life from Child of Night, get some triggers from your Poison Tip Archer, potentially force the Snapping Drake to enter combat and die. Ideally we would have started that process last turn, but now kind of the ship is leaving the harbor, and you need to be you need to get on it. So this is the time to start getting everybody into the red zone.
Well, looks like that's what he's thinking, and here they come. I assume the Baloth is included in that, but 4 creatures turning sideways.
He didn't put it into the red zone or kind of indicate.
There was no edging forward, was there?
It seems.
That's
the most terrified Vigilant Baloth I've ever seen. Honestly, I mean, I'm.
He's vigilant. He's like looking left, looking right, looking up, looking down. It's like, anyone coming? Anyone coming? Anyone coming? Can I attack? Can I? Nope.
Gotta stay safe. But so if you're Ivan here, I mean, Lachlan does have a lot of mana. He has all those cards from the Colossal Majesty. The Sea Serpent does jump in front of the Child of Night. Let's see what he does with the rest of it here. Will he block with the Snapping Drake? He gets, what looks like it might be a free block on one of the 1/1s, but it does carry some risk, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you get to trigger the Poison Tip Archer and the Doomed Dissenter upgrades, and the Reassembling Skeleton just comes right back. So you're putting your Snapping Drake into combat for pretty minimal gain.
Yeah, it looks like he took the hit there. So 11 all with Child of Night hitting the bin here. Now Lachlan with all of those extra cards. Here comes the Skeleton Archer to, let's see if it's able to... not quite able to finish anything off here, so just going Going to land. It's a 3/3 for 4 mana. It's another attacker next turn.
You got to love the way Ivan played this, right? By not blocking with the Snapping Drake, it's almost like he put a read on Lachlan for having that Skeleton Archer. So really nicely played by Ivan Schrader.
Yeah, and one of the other options, I believe that was available to Lachlan there was shooting his own reassembling skeleton, right, to get an extra point of damage, but he didn't do that, which makes you this next attack for Ivan a little scarier, right? So now he's got this open mana.
Yeah, and Ivan has 4, 7, 10, what appears to be a lethal attack.
Right.
But it would require him to attack with everything, tap out, and
very risky.
And boy, we've seen some brutal root snares in this format. But
yeah, Roots there, of course, the 2-mana Fog, so the 1-mana card is basically his model after. Prevent all combat damage this turn. That would be extremely good here because it would then allow Lachlan to attack back for lethal. But it looks like the Stag and the Pegasus Course are entering combat for Schrader here. All right, so he did not.
I think they're having a life total.
Okay, let's figure this out. All right, so this has been a really interesting game to this point. I mean, if you're Ivan, do you just say, I should go for it here, or do you think you can afford to try to be a little slower?
Well, it depends on what you draw. It looks like the Archer may still be on the stack. There was a debate on the life total with the Archer on the stack.
Oh, he's going to go ahead and cancel it. Okay. All right, so cancel for Schrader catching up here, and that'll just do it.
Yep.
All right, the cancel on the Archer, and that means that those creatures are lethal, and Schrader takes it down 2-1.
Paul, we're in the early rounds here, and obviously not everyone is a world-class player at any stage of a GP, much less round 1 or 2. But if we watch that back, which unfortunately we don't have time to now, do you think we would see opportunities for Canavan to have been more aggressive and potentially change the outcome of that second game?
Yeah, I think so. It's difficult to say, and given that Ivan still had access to that cancel, Ivan's situation was pretty strong. But I think that when it becomes very clear that blocking is not going to be a profitable path to keeping yourself alive, and the game is going to end after a certain amount of turns, you need to kind of realize that and start figuring out other plans. And so, were the tools there for Lachlan to kind of make aggressive attacks and force Ivan into some uncomfortable combats? Yes, they were there. I don't know if it would have been enough for him to win the game, but I would have loved to see the way maybe Reed Duke had jumped into that seat and made some of those attacks with green-black.
Do you have any advice for players to identify those kind of scenarios? Because for a lot of us, we're so busy looking at the 3 cards in our hand and the 5 land that are on the table here and the 4 life we've got there, that kind of much sort of broader view of where have we reached in the game isn't actually very apparent to a lot of players a lot of the time. It's only, I can do this, or I can do this, or I can do nothing, which of these 3? But that understanding of where we've reached in order to inform that choice doesn't feel like that's an easy thing to teach.
No, and in Limited, I think that the best way that you can do it is just kind of it's like teaching addition with the finger method, right? In Limited, I think the best thing you can do is figure out, okay, if I put all my creatures sideways, sometimes you even have to pick cards physically up and say, okay, they might block like this, they may block like this. Then you start to think to myself, intuitively that felt like a bad attack to me, but now that I look at it, things were actually going pretty well the way that I line things up, understanding their best blocks. And then conversely, if I don't attack, what are my realistic blocks on my next turn? I mean, my opponents have triggered abilities and activated abilities. They're very likely to remember them. And so, leaving my creatures on defense may not lead to as profitable of a defensive situation as I may be hoping. So you may be obligated to be aggressive in order to actually get your creatures into combat. And if they're not attacking and they're not blocking, they're not doing anything.
Right, okay. And then it's basically Owen Turtenwald's equipment sitting off to the side, not doing anything.
Right.
All right, well, round 2 is in the books. Behind us, you can see players getting seated for round number 3. When we come back, Palavida Dama de Rosa and Maria Bartholdi will be here with the story of round 3. It's our international MTG launch. 4 Brazilian players, all of whom are en route for the Pro Tour right here in Party City, USA, Minneapolis. We'll see you in just a couple of minutes.